Hey everybody, Marsha from Be So Creative. And so we are now starting our mystery sew along. And the thing that I think is fun about a mystery is you really don't know what it's going to look like. But if you are a brave soul and you are ready to try something new, anytime you're doing a mystery, it kind of gets you outside of your box that we all seem to get into. Hey everybody, Marsha from Be So Creative, and we are going to begin our mystery sew along. Now, what I'm doing is I am actually going to be recording the how-to on this because I'm not sure of all of the people who have signed up. How many of you are a beginner and you're not sure how to do some of the things that we're going to be doing? So this is a recording for you all, and we will record one for every block that we're doing. So just to give you a heads up on that. So we're just going to get started. Okay, so the first thing that you need to remember is you needed to go to be so creative nm at gmail.com and request your fabric prep pages. That's quite a mouthful. And when you do that, you've got this, which is going to give you some ideas on color. And you're also going to get this little sheet, which is your scrappy fabric guide, because again, as you notice, each one of these are listed from light down to dark and backing. And so the reason that I want you to use this is once you have chosen your fabrics, and these are really great little ways to pick your colors, then you need to know which one is which, because the pattern itself, and I will show you that in a minute, is actually showing you which fabrics you are going to be working with for that particular block. And we'll see that in just a minute. So the really nice thing to do for yourself is to take this little scrappy fabric guide, and you will notice that they are listed from L1, L2, L3, L4, L5, M1, M2, M3, M4, and then dark 1, 2, and 3. So this is what I want you to do. Once you have selected your fabric, go ahead and put a little swatch so that it's easy for you to see which one you are working with. The other thing that I wanted to show you, because this is just how my brain works, and I'm doing this, so hopefully you all will, if you struggle with this kind of stuff, this will help you. So what I did was I went to my fabric stash and I got out my fabrics that I had piled up that coincided with my little list here. And then I went ahead, and as you can see, I have actually labeled the big pieces for my mystery sew along, so that when I reached over into my fabric pile, I was able to just grab what I needed. And that made it easier for me. So I have my fabrics listed in two places. One, everybody got a label, and two, every piece of fabric was actually put onto my fabric guide. So that is one of the first things that I think is going to make it easier for you to do your fabric selection for the block and knowing which one you're working with. Okay, so the first block that we're looking at is, oh yes, look, block 1. So what we're going to be looking at here is, this is what I was talking about. When you look at the fabric that you need, this is where you're going to see the L's and the M's and the D's, all right? And if you remember, like I told you, on our little list here, they are listed L1, L2, L3, L4, L5. I've already said this, but I want you to notice that this is what you're going to be working with, and that is why you need to put a little sample of your fabrics in these little squares, and I just glued them down. So the fabrics that we're going to be working with for block 1 is L5, M3, and D1. So I have mine laid out here. Let me back this up so you can see this. Here is my L5, my M3, and my D1. Okay. Now the pattern is telling you you need 4.5-inch squares of L5, 8 4.5-inch squares of M3, and 4 4.5-inch squares of D1. Now, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be putting these guys together and making them into half square triangles for our first block. So what we're going to do is let's look at our instructions here. Using the 4.5-inch squares, place the M3 squares to an L5 square with right sides together, and we're going to make 4 of each of these sets. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, here's my L5, and we're going to take 1, 2, 3, 4, and these guys are going to be put together. And then we're going to take our D1, here he is, and he's going to go together with our M3. So here we're going to pair these guys up. Now I know everybody has a certain way of doing their half square triangles. There are rulers that you can use, and there are a technique where you can make 4 at once, that kind of thing. However, we are just going to work with the blocks that we have, and we're going to actually be making 2 half square triangles at a time. Because what we're actually going to be looking at is here is how our block is going together. And the really nice thing is the blocks are actually made up of L5 and M3 and M3 and D1. So this is going to be real easy to do. So the first thing we're going to do, I'm going to set these guys aside. And we're going to put these 2 together. And remember, we're doing right sides together, okay? So what I have done is I have already, okay, there we go. So I'm going to stop and I'm going to put these together and pair them up. All right, so the way that the pattern actually has you make your half square triangles is you're going to take your squares and I put them together. So here is my M5 and L5 and M3, and you're going to just take your ruler and you're going to draw a line from point to point. And I've already put mine together. All right, so there we go. And then you're going to take this and you can draw a line 1/4 of an inch on each side. And as you can see, it's a little bit hard to see, but I've gone ahead and I've drawn those on there. So this is a quick and easy way to make your half square triangles. What you're going to do is we're going to sew this and then we're going to cut them apart on that center line. So that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm just going to go ahead and draw my diagonal line from point to point. Move my 1/4 inch. Draw that. Turn it around. Line it up. And that one's ready to go. And so I'm going to finish. I'm going to do all of these. This is a really great technique, especially for people who might be new to making half square triangles. This way you know that you are accurate, and accuracy is key when you are piecing your quilt blocks together, because we want to make sure that we have the seam allowances like we need them to be. And this way, this is probably one of the best ways for you to do that. So if you are a new quilter, well, we're glad to have you join the club that we're all in. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go and we're going to actually sew on the two outside lines that are on both sides of the diagonal line that we drew from point to point. So that's going to be our next thing. Okay, so what I do is if you have trouble with any kind of slippage when you're putting your blocks together and you're fixing to sew them, a lot of times it's just really nice to just take a few more extra minutes. It's not going to be that big of a deal to just sit and just pin these babies together so that they're not sliding around or moving. They're just there where you need them to be. And that way it keeps the lower block that you can't see from shifting and makes it a lot easier for you to sew. All right, so here we go. We're going to sew these. Let's get right here in front of there we go. All right, so remember we drew the line down the middle and then we're sewing 1/4 of an inch on each side of those lines to make our first, we're making our half square triangle. So let me adjust this because I have to be able to see so I can sew as well. All right. What we're going to do is we're just going to chain piece these. So if you are new to quilting, this is called chain piecing. As you can see, I've got all of my blocks have been put together or pinned together. And I'm just going to sew one right after the other, and I'm not going to cut my thread in between. And then once we've gone this direction, then once we've got everybody sewn together, then we will turn around and we will cut them apart and then flip them around and sew the other side. So the nice thing about doing it this way is that it goes quite a bit faster because you're not stopping after each one and turning it around and sewing the other side. You're going to get the other side sewn, but you're just going to wait until all one side is sewn. And the nice thing about the drawn line is I do have something that I am able to actually see where my needle is supposed to go. Okay. I do want to show you one of the things. I'm sewing on a Bernina 570. And the foot that I actually have on is called the number 34. It's like most sewing machine companies, they'll have a J foot or something that looks similar to this. The reason that I like this one is that I'm actually able to see through it. So it makes it easy for me to kind of see where I'm at. I don't know if you can see it from actually looking through the foot, but I can see it. I can see that the little red line, which is the center mark on this foot, is right on top of my chalk line that I've drawn. So I really love this clear number 34 foot for my Bernina 570. Just check with whatever sewing machine company that you are working with their machine. If you'd like to see if they have one, it never hurts to ask. Okay, so here we go. We're going to trim our threads. Whoops. There. Now I'm going to back this up just a little bit. And I will tell you when when I'm chain piecing, I like to use this little guy because all I have to do is there's actually inside there is an old rotary blade that goes inside of this little plastic thing. And I can just sit here, and the nice thing is I don't have to pick my scissors up. I just lay that in there just like so. And always remember, get rid of those threads that are on the end because they just get in your way. And now what we're going to do is we're going to flip these around and we're going to sew them. So the other side that we need to do. So here we go again. And it sounds like my machine needs some oil. So that'll be something I'll do here in just a minute. I just want to remind you all that your sewing machine is a lot like your car. If we didn't take care of our car and oil the parts that needed oiling and clean it um, when it was time for, well, I don't, who wants to get into a filthy car? But anyway, so the thing is, you do need to clean and oil your machine, but you do want to check with your machine manufacturer. There are some machines that they say that they don't need to oil them. But I will tell you, I oil my Bernina probably after every couple of days of sewing because they're metal parts. They're metal parts, and they want just a little drop of oil. We're not talking about, an oil bath, but just a little drop here and there. So be sure and check with your sewing machine manufacturer. I don't want you to get mad at me if they say, oh, you shouldn't have oiled that. Please check with your machine manufacturer, or you can also check with your local sewing machine dealer or sewing machine repair person and see what they recommend for your machine. Okay, so there we have that. We've got all of these stitched. Didn't take me long at all, did it? No, because we were chain piecing. Here we go. Get those cut apart. And again, remember, get rid of those tails. Started it off. Okay, we're going to get rid of the pins. I like this magnetic pin cushion because all I have to do is throw my pins at it and it grabs them. And then sometimes, I don't know if y'all have ever dropped your pins, but I have dropped mine. And it's nice to just pick up my magnetic pin cushion and they just get sucked up real quick. Okay, all right, so we've got those done. Now, we're going to cut these apart. All right. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we've sewn on our lines that we've drawn, and we are going to Put these guys on the center diagonal line. So you're just going to line up your ruler with the points. Get this. You can actually line your 1/4 inch up on the seam allowance that you stitched. There, get rid of that. Okay, I have people tell me that they have trouble with their ruler flopping back and forth when they're cutting. One of the best things to do is learn to push your pinky off and let it hold up against the edge of the ruler. And then the other thing is that you can actually move your finger right along with the rotary cutter as you're going up. Okay, so there we've got them pulled apart. And let's see how they look. Oh, that's beautiful. Okay, so now what we're going to do is I'm going to show you one of my favorite techniques to make sure that my seam allowance, when I open this up, is nice and flat. I will say that one of the things that I hear most from different beginning quilters is the fact that a lot of times their blocks are not the correct size. And a lot of times that happens because instead of making sure that your seam allowance is nicely pressed open, it actually will have like a little pucker in it. And that creates a smaller size block. And we don't want to have that happen. So let me set this aside. And for me, and I really do this, this is one of my favorite techniques. And I don't know if it's a technique or it's just something that I do all the time. Remember, you're always going to, unless the pattern states otherwise, you're always going to press your seam allowance to the dark side of the fabric. You're going to go to the dark fabric and press your seam allowance. All right, so I'm going to show you what I use to make sure that my seam allowances are nice and flat. So the first thing that you're going to notice is you see this black piece of whatever underneath my block. This is actually a very fine sandpaper. And the reason that I put sandpaper underneath is that the sandpaper, when I'm pushing on my fabric block to get it opened and nice and flat, it keeps the fabric from shifting. And so let me just show you the difference between the two. So I'm going to pull away and just use my cutting mat. Okay. And what happens is you can see that my piece, when I'm pushing on that, it's actually kind of stretching because it's not being held in place by the mat or the surface of my sewing cabinet. But when I take this and I open up my seam and I push, the sandpaper holds my block, and I love that. The other thing that I use all the time on if you see any of my quilts that I've made, every seam actually has been done with this technique. So I put my sandpaper behind, and I use either the Easy Press pen from Acorn, or I use the fabric folding pen. And what you do with these is, let me just show you. There is a tip, and I'm going to show you both tips. There is a tip on each one of these that's absorbent, and there's a liquid down inside both of these. All right. So how this works is you're going to take whichever one, and I'm going to demo with both of them, and you can push on the tip, and then you're just going to run that liquid that's down inside there right along your stitching line. And see, you can see how all of a sudden it's changing color. So then I can use my thumb or my pointer finger, and I'm going to take my fingers and I'm just going to push my block, the one side of my block, away from my stitching line. And then what this does is this allows me to just make sure that I have absolutely no puckers in my seam allowance. The other thing that I use a lot of times is, get this guy open up. Okay, I think he's going to be my darker, so I'm going to press to him. And whichever one you're going to press to, you always put that on the top side. So this is the fabric folding pin, and as you can see, there it is. I'm running that right along. A lot of people have used either a wooden iron or the roll and press from Clover. And so we're going to do the same thing. We're going to open this up. And we're just going to still use my fingers to press them open. And then I'm just going to take my wooden iron and I'm just going to rub it right along that seam allowance. The nice thing about that is, again, I can use my finger, but as you can see, I'm getting some arthritis in this finger. So that's going to give you an indication of how old I am. And sometimes it hurts my fingers to have to push on that. So I get out my little wooden iron and I use this all the time. So I do that for all of my blocks get this same treatment. Every seam allowance on every quilt that I make has been done this exact same way. And then that way I know that my seam allowances are nice and flat. So I'm going to do this real quick, and then we'll come back and I'm going to show you how we're going to press these, because yes, I do press them when I'm done. And then we're going to trim our blocks, just like the pattern says. Okay, so now I have all of my seams pressed to one side. So now what we're going to do is we're going to actually go and press them, and then we're going to come back and we're going to see what our pattern says. All right, so like I said, we've got all of our seams pushed to one side with our fabric folding pin and our wooden iron. So now we're just going to make sure and give these a press. And I want you to remember that this is called pressing, not ironing. You don't want to do this with your iron. You want to make sure that you are pressing, which means you're just going to hit that seam allowance, make sure it's nice and flat. And you're going to do that just raising and lowering your iron. And then that way, the reason that you want to do that is if you iron, there's a possibility that you're going to distort your blocks. And we don't want to distort our blocks. We just want to make sure that they've been pressed and that seam has kind of been set. So that is something that we definitely want to make sure that we do. And I always just go ahead and I press the whole block because, you know, why not? Now I'm actually, the fabrics that I'm using for my mystery is actually batiks that are from my stash. Because I will tell you, I have a really lovely stash. So now they're pressed, and the next thing that our pattern tells us is we have 8 half square triangles of each color. So 4, 5, 6, 7. Let me see. Did I miss? Oh, I have some over here. I better press these. Let me get these pressed real quick. Glad I saw those. Okay, so we have 8 half square triangles of each color set. And well, now what we're going to do is we're going to trim these up to a 3.5-inch square. So let me get my square and we're going to start trimming. Okay, so now our pattern is asking us to trim our blocks to 3.5. Now what I want to do is I want to show you that when you lay this on here and I actually am measuring my block, they put in a margin of error for us sewists, because a lot of times we may be a little bit inaccurate in our sewing. So it's a lot easier to create something that's a little bit bigger and trim it down to what we need. So to do that, we know that we're going to be cutting off each side. We want to get to 3.5. So we're going to trim this down 1/4 of an inch on each side. So here we go. So we're going to go over here and I've got my ruler, and let me show you this real quick. The thing that's nice about this ruler is, let me find my pointer so you all can see what I'm talking about. It's marked off in eighths and quarters, 3/8, 1/2 an inch, 5/8, 3/4, 7/8, and then the inch mark. So to use this, the nice thing about this is that I know that the block is a little bit larger than a 4-inch block. The other thing I want you to pay attention to on any of your square up rulers is that you do want to have a line that runs diagonally so that you can actually take that and line that up against your seam allowance, because this is what we're going to be trimming off. The other thing I want you to notice is you've got these are called little dog ears, and that happens when we push our seam allowance to one side, and it wouldn't matter which side they went to, you're always going to get that little dog ear when you are working with your half square triangles. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we get rid of the dog ears, and we're going to trim our block down to where it is 3.5. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, here's my 3.5-inch mark here, and then it comes across right here. And so I know that right now we're a little bit at a little over 4 inches when I measure this block. Okay, we're almost to 4 1/8. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move my ruler until that 1/4 inch is right along the edge of my fabric. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing here across the bottom. Now, do you notice that the center line here is running right along my half square triangle's seam allowance? And that is what I want it to do, okay? I want it to stay lined up with that. And because I pressed and didn't iron, it's not distorted at all, okay? So I'm going to hold this, I'm going to put my pinky off, and I'm going to trim that and trim that one away. So then we're going to turn it around all the way around, okay? And here's my dog ear up here. I know I'm in the right direction because I've got that seam allowance that I'm going to line my ruler up with. So there it is. And now what I want you to notice is this. There's my 3.5-inch dotted line on this ruler, and every ruler is different, so you have to learn how to look at your ruler. But here's my 3.5 here, and I've got the 3.5 coming down the side, and I'm holding my ruler, and we're just going to slice that off. And now the beauty of this is I have a really lovely 3.5-inch square, which again, my pattern tells me to square up to 3.5. I'm going to show you that one more time, and then I'm going to get mine all trimmed up, and you can get yours trimmed up as well. All right, so here we go. Nice thing is that they're all coming out about 3 or 4 1/8. So we're going to slide this down to the 1/4 inch. I've got my 3 3/4 here, 3 3/4 down the side. Go flip it all the way around because I need that line and my seam allowance to line up. Three and a half inch, 3.5 inch. All right, so there's another one that's all lined up and ready to go. So I'm going to stop the recording here for just a second, and I'm going to go and get these. Okay, I've got everybody trimmed up. They are 3.5 inch squares. The nice thing is I know that they're the right size because I was able to trim them up, which was part of the plan. Now this is where the fun begins. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to divide them up into their little stack of. So we have the same ones. It'll be easier to grab everything. Oh, some of that stuck to my. Oh, look, you see, there's a little piece of my dog ear didn't come off, so we're just gonna clip him off. All right, so when we look at our pattern, well, let me throw my thing at you. All right, so when we look at our pattern, we see that we have our L5 and M3, so we know that that's this group of blocks. And then here we have our M3 and D1. So that's going to be this group of blocks. Okay. So what I like to use is this is a design board. Let me see if I can raise my camera up just a little so you can see it a little bit better. And what I like to do with these is it's got quilt batting on it. So as you can see, all these little threads are stuck to it. This is a really nice way to lay out your blocks and put your big block all together. So that's what we're gonna do now. And the way that we're going to do that is this. Remember, this is the light 5 and medium 3 and the medium 3 and dark 1. So we're going to look at our pattern and we're going to lay these out in the same position that they're shown here. So my first one is going to be L5 and M3. So we know that M3 is going to go up at the top. And then we're going to get the dark one, the M3 and the D1, and it's going to go here. Okay. And we're going to take our L5 and M3, and it's going this way. Now, you're probably saying, well, how do I know which one that is? Well, as you can see, they're shaded exactly like our first one here, okay? And then the last one is going to be this guy. So there's our first row. We've got it all laid out, okay? Our second row is the L5 and M3, and the M3 is going here towards the center. There we go. You see we're creating that. Then we have our D1M3, and it's going to go there. And on this one, we have our D1M3. He's going to go there. And then last but not least, here he is again, the D1M3. There's our next row. Our next row, again, starts with a D1M3, and the D1 is going to go up in the upper right-hand corner. Another D1M3, and we're creating another little patch here. Another D1M3. And then last but not least, oh, there's a dog here that got stuck. Okay, and then last row here, we've got our L5 and M3. Another L5 and M3, and he's going to go this way. There we go. Our last D1 M3 and L1 M3. All right, so here we go. So here is our block. And I don't know about you, but I think it's really beautiful. Kind of, it leans a little bit more on the dark side, but I think it's gorgeous. Okay, so now we get to sew this baby together. And so how we're going to do that is we're going to, just like we did earlier, chain piecing, we're going to do the exact same thing here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay this over. So I'm going to take the right and lay it over the left, just like so. I'm going to do the same thing on this side too. So let's go ahead and do that. Last but not least, okay. Then I'm going to come to my sewing machine. Let me pull this back over this way. Okay, there we have that. And now we're going to sew this at 1/4 of an inch. So I need to change my foot, put on my 1/4 inch foot. All right, so here's my 1/4 inch foot. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, let me pull this back up so you can see what I'm talking about. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start at the top here, and I'm going to pick this up. And because you pressed your seam allowances to the dark side, these two seam allowances, this one and this one, they're pressed in opposite directions. Okay, so see, this one's going down. If I turn my block over, this one's going up. The really nice thing about that is that it does what's called nesting, and they nest together perfectly. In other words, as I line up this edge, these two seam allowances butt right up against each other because they're going in opposite directions. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give it a pin. And I want to make sure, I'm going to turn this way because it's easier for me to work with. I want to make sure that that is staying nice and butted up. And I can pull back the top block. And as you can see, hopefully my camera will clear up here. There we go. You can actually see that this piece is butted up right up against this piece. So we're going to hold that there like that. Make sure he stays there. And we're going to give that a pin as well. And we're going to work our way down our board this way. All right. So what you can do is you can go ahead and you can pin these guys together, because remember we did this. So when I flip this, I can just get all of my pieces pinned together, because I want to make sure that this seam, that my two pieces are right against each other. And the same at the top and the same at the bottom. Everything needs to be lined up. And that's pretty critical for what we want to make sure that everything is lined up correctly. So I'm just going to quickly pin all these and then we'll get to sewing. And I'm going to lay it back in there where it goes, okay? Because it's real easy to get these mixed up. And this board really helps me to maintain my pieces being correct and in the right position. But I will tell you, on occasion, yes, we have our moments where we've turned our block. It's always easy to just stop and open it up and make sure. Yeah, see, those two are supposed to line up together, and they are. So he's going to lay back down there. And then this guy, because those were pressed the same direction, they do not want to play nice. So they're not going to butt up against each other, but we're going to see how that, make sure that works. Lay him there. Come up here and do this guy. Oops. Again, you just want to make sure that your edges are even. He gets laid back on the row where he needs to be. Edges even. Come back around and one more, and here we are. This guy, again, they are going to butt right up against each other, which is what we want them to do. All right, so I've got them all laid out here, as you can see. Let's go back over here and let's get this baby, get these guys lined out, shall we? Here we go. I missed the edge of that, so we're going to back up a little. There we go. And I pull my pin out, or I try to as I go along. And remember, on a 1/4-inch foot, your needle is in the center needle position and you are running the edge of your fabric along the edge of your foot. This is another one of my favorite tools. It's called the 6th finger stiletto. It has a flat piece of metal and it's got a pointed piece of metal. And I like to, when I have two seams that are coming together, I like to hold that with my 6th finger stiletto, and that way everybody is behaving themselves, because sometimes you just cannot. Sometimes those seam allowances just get naughty. The other thing I like about it is because it's flat, I can actually hold that seam allowance, because a lot of times when you're sewing, it has a tendency to want to flip open. We don't want it to do that. So I'm going to hold that, and I'm just going, and I'm able to run it right up underneath my foot. And I like that because it prevents the seam from flipping on me, and then I don't have to either unsew it or just have this weird bulky lump. And see, I'm going to take that pin out. So see how I made sure those are together, then I can hold it. I love this tool. Okay, so that's the first row. So now what I'm going to do is I could keep sewing these, but I'm just going to go ahead and pull these out. And they're going to get laid back over here where they belong. And they're in the order. I didn't cut them apart. I left them together. And now we're going to come to this next group. Hold that guy there. As you can see, we are chain piecing. And I'm holding that seam allowance down so it doesn't flip up. Okay, here we go. All right, so I picked this up and I'm just laying it down just as in the order. And I will tell you one of the easiest ways to say, oh yeah, this is the top. You have those long threads. Well, let me show you since I better move this. See those long threads that are right there? I know that that's the block I started with. So I'm going to just lay that back up there. And now I'm going to open these up. And everything is in nice order. A little bit more so you can see my block. There we go. Now, hooray. So now what we're going to do is we can either sew these rows together, which that's going to make it pretty easy. So we're just going to flip them apart because I could be using this little guy that I showed you earlier. The only reason that I don't now is because I've got my block laid out the way it's supposed to be. And when you start picking them up and moving each individual piece around, a lot of times what happens is you have a tendency to, oh, whoops, you switch something around. And I don't want to switch anything around because as you can see, it's in here the way it's supposed to be. And it will make it a lot easier on me if I leave it sitting on my design board. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to do the same thing. We're just going to pull this over. And this guy's going here, and this guy's going here. Last but not least. And we're going to stop and we're going to pin again. Okay. And I realize that pinning takes a little bit of extra time, but the thing is that it's worth the effort to do it, because I want to make sure that my edges are nice and even. And remember, we're going to put them back where they go because we want to get them messed up or flipped the wrong way. I had that happen one time, and I was making a big quilt, and I thought the quilt top was done, and I was very pleased with my little self. And I laid it out on the bed to check it and make sure everything was right. And unfortunately, right in the center of the quilt, I had turned a block the wrong way. So the design was messed up. And guess what I had to do? I had to take that sucker apart and fix it, because it was for a sample for the store I was working at. So can't have things in there backwards, you know. All right, here we go. So see, now all my blocks are, my rows are together, and we're going to do the exact same thing. We're just going to go and we're going to sew these together, and then we'll put the rows together, and we will have our project, our little block, just about done. See, there's my tails of my threads, so I know where I'm at. There's my, and I have to say, I don't know if you can see it, but my needle is in the down position. The reason I like to have it in the down position is that then I am actually able to butt my fabric up against that needle and make sure that it's where it needs to be for my 1/4 inch seam allowance. And I don't know, that just works better for me to do that. Hey. All right, here we go. Here are our rows. Okay, and now we're going to just nip these apart. Okay, so I need to sew my rows together, but as you can see, I have not pressed any of my seams, and I am a definite seam presser, and then I'm also a very avid block presser. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just set my board over here. Yes, look what I'm grabbing, my sandpaper, because my sandpaper is my friend. Now, when we put these rows together, I just want to remind you that we want to nest our seam allowances, just like we did on this block here. The way that we're going to do that is all of our seam allowances in one row are going to be pressed in one direction, and the next row are going to be pressed in the other direction. So what I like to do is when I am sewing my blocks together, the row that I'm sewing on the top is, I want my seam allowances to be going in towards the foot because I can see where they're going. The bottom one, as long as they are going down, I'm good to go. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to take my row, and I've got my easy press pin, and I'm going to prep all of my seam allowances. So I'm going to do this one. I'm going to do this one. And last but not least, I'm going to do this one. Okay. Then I've got my wooden iron here. They're going that way. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to push against my seam, rub it with my wooden iron. I'm going to do the same thing to this seam. Give it a nice press with my wooden iron. And then, of course, last but not least, I'm going to make sure that these are all going the right direction. Flip him over. There we go. Now, what I'm going to do is, I'm not going to show you, but I'm going to take this and I'm going to turn and I'm going to press this with my iron. Okay, so see, now look at how nice and flat those seam allowances are. They look great. So this is going to go back on my row. Yay. All right, so this one is going to go in the opposite direction. So we're going to come this way. Easy press pin, run that right along there. Here. And last but not least, this guy. Okay. And then we're going to, now right here where all those little points come together, sometimes it gets an attitude. See how that he's wanting to go the other way. Well, guess what? I get to be in charge of him. So he is not going that way. He's going to go the way I want him to. So we're going to do that. And then this guy is going to come here. And last but not least, to this one. There's another one of those spots where they don't want to misbehave. There we go. See, he gets laid right back in there. All right, this guy is, the seam allowances are going to be pointing that way to the left. Okay. He's being naughty too, so we're going to make sure he's nice and flat. Four. Okay. Oh, and I forgot to press these guys, so let me press them real quick. All righty, and last but not least, this guy is going this direction. Get impressed? All right, now's the time to check. Make sure everybody is going the way they're supposed to. Here's our block, what it's supposed to look like. So when I look at this, here's my D1s together. Here they are again. Here they are again. And so I am correct. My block is right. So now, last but not least, we're just going to sew these rows together. So again, we're just going to flip these. I'm going to pull the camera down just a little bit closer so you can see what I'm doing. And I want to make sure that my points come together. So the first thing, well, let me move this. First thing I'm going to do is, you see where those two seams come together? There's that little point. I'm going to put my pin in there. It's a little bit stiff there, so we can get it in there. There it is. See how it's right there at the top? You see my pin? There it is. Okay. And he's going to go right into this seam allowance right here. Okay, so there's one. So those two are going to line up. And then we're going to do the same thing here. And these are going to bump right up against each other. That out of the way. I'm going to pin him in place. Make sure my edges are even up the top. And then my last seam allowance. See, there's another where the seams come together. So we're going to put a pin in that point. And we're going to put a pin in that point. And I like to pin on both sides. And I better pin this one here and make sure he's good. Okay. And my edges are even. Yay. Pin there. So this row is pinned and ready to go. So I'm just going to lay him back where he was. And we're going to do the exact same thing to this guy, to this row. Down a little bit more. Okay, so see, I'm right at the top of that. And this is going to pop right in there. And because I've taken the time to press my seam allowances in opposite directions, they are just nesting beautifully. And that is really what we want to have happen. Pin him on both sides. Okay. And do the same thing to this one. Now this one, as you can see, does not have, there's no triangle that's coming together. So we're just going to pin that at about the 1/4 of an inch. Wiggle him around, and yes, they are nesting together beautifully. And here we are back here to those seams come together. Looks good. And here it is again. See where they come together? It's going to go right in there. Okay. All right, now we're going to get those sewn together. This is where my 6th finger stiletto comes in handy. Pull that pin out. Okay, before we go any further, do you see where those 2 seams come together? We want to make sure that our needle lands right there where they come together. I know you can't see it, but yay, it did. So that makes me happy. See? Make sure my seam allowances are staying where they should. There's another one of those points, so we're hoping our needle is going to hit that. Okay, so far so good. Okay, now our next one, my next row. Okay, there's my 2 rows. Right. Now we're going to put these 2 rows together, and then we'll get it all pressed. off a little. This one, neither one of these has a point, so they're just going to nest together. So we've got one more that's like that, so put our pin in. Looks good. Okay, this is one of those times when, because of the way the seams are, sometimes you're not going to be able to sew the one that's on the top where they're going in the opposite direction. So we're just going to make sure I take my 6-finger stiletto, slide it under here to make sure that seam allowance is in the correct position. And it is behaving itself. Got to do it again because that one's going in the opposite direction, the one we can't see. Okay. All right. Got all of our rows are sewn together. Oh gosh, look how beautiful that is. I love it. Hope you love it. All right. Now, you know what we're fixing to do. We're getting our and because it doesn't matter which way you press these, the only thing is that a lot of times pattern designers will actually tell you which way they want you to press these seams, because if they are connecting into another block, you want them to be able to go in opposite directions as well. So always look on your pattern. This pattern does not tell us which direction we should be pressing our seams. So we're always going to go with go to the dark side, Star Wars. We're going to go to the dark side every time because that is normally how quilt patterns are written. You always press to the dark side, but always read your pattern, because sometimes designers, because of the way the design is, they may tell you to press to a lighter side. You just have to make sure and take the time to read your pattern before you bail off and just get after it. So I can tell you right now, this pattern does not have the directions telling us which direction to press our seam allowance. Okay. And sometimes these guys just get a little bulky. And so I really do this on occasion when they're really bulky and they just don't want to behave themselves. I get a hammer and I put like a paper towel over my piece because I don't want, the metal on that hammer sometimes oxidize and leaves black marks. I don't want that on my quilt. So I can actually just take a paper towel, lay it on there, and then I tap on that with my hammer, and it makes my bulky seam allowances behave itself. Okay, so now I'm going to twirl my camera around so we can get this baby pressed. And pressing always makes everything just look so nice. So you don't have to lift up a lot, just lift up a little bit. And so you're not, again, ironing, you're actually pressing. Okay, so bring that up a little so it doesn't look so odd. So there we have our beautiful block 1 for our mystery sew along. Okay, yay. So here is our first block of our mystery sew along. I hope that I have given you some good tips on how to proceed with this block. Again, I normally teach to people who are beginners. So those of you who already know how to do a great 1/4-inch seam allowance or press your seams, lay your block out, hang in there with me because again, I'm teaching for those who this is something that's kind of new to them. So I hope you understand how basic, I guess, I'm trying to be with this. So anyway, so our next one, stay tuned because we will be doing block 2 in a couple of weeks. So thanks, guys. Okay, here's our block 1 of our mystery sew along. And I hope that you've gained some good tips from this. Block 2 is coming, so stay tuned, and I look forward to having you in our next class.